welcome back. This is your man Warrior. This is another patron roster review. This is Chosen Undead with Womp Rat Cartel. That's right, the Womp Rat Cartel is kicking it, and Chosen Undead is doing really well. So Chosen Undead's been playing for about a year and is a small dolphin and is doing really well, staying in the top 100, actually staying in the top 80 pretty consistently in both. Really focused on both ships and arena, so that's excellent. Asked a little bit about heroic AAT teams. I'm not going to go into every phase. I'm going to actually focus you in because you asked for a lot of other stuff, which is arena team. You want to know about that. Your fleet arena, how, any tweaks there. Who should be your next Zeta? Which team in general should you be focused on? And then heroic AAT. Just a ton of stuff, and that just shows how much is in this game and how unfocused people can get because there's just so much to choose from. Side note, if you're watching this, that means you are subscribed to my new channel, Warrior Roster Reviews, and I appreciate that. If somebody is wondering where these videos went, make sure you tell them to subscribe to the new channel. I do already have well over 1,000 subs on this new channel, so a lot of you are going to get this content, so that is excellent. But we're going to get right into it. We're going to go to arena, and the first thing when I'm looking at arena was I see that you do not have a tank at all. And then there's some other generalized characters you're going to want to farm to just have some diversity. You're going to want to be able to spread out and have some more diversity for your teams to change out for different teams you're going to be presented with while you're climbing. But having a tank is actually really a must to slow. It's like a speed bump. It's to slow the opposing team down. And really, it's to slow the opposing team down when you're on the offense. Less so when you're on the defense because they can really pick apart a team. We all know that. But with the other thing I noticed is your Han Solo. You definitely are going to first off want to remod Han Solo. So the first thing I noticed is you have crit chance and then you have potency. Now, you're using him for Han Solo, or you're using him for arena, and I'm sure you're using him for other areas of the game. And I know people will tell you potency is important because he has a stun, and potency is important because he has turn meter reduction. Mine is at like 21% potency, and I get the stun all the time, and I get the turn meter reduction all the time, like 80+% of the time. Do you want him to be a stunner and turn meter reducer, or do you want him to absolutely obliterate your opponents? You've got to decide, because you can't do both with him. There's only so many mods, and you have to decide on which one. If you're trying to make him 100% consistent on stuns and on the turn meter reduction, then the way you did it is fine. But I'm going to suggest to you that you should remod him because he's the #1 damage dealer in the game, which means he naturally should be doing the most damage in the game over any other character because his potential. So I would suggest to you the mod sets should be a critical chance mod set and a critical damage mod set. This arrow, of course, should be speed. This, of course, should be critical damage. And this should actually be offense, 5.88% primary offense. And then, of course, on this bottom left, you can do protection, and that is fine with speed secondaries. So with the critical chance and critical damage, your goal is to get his crit chance up to around 70, if possible. And then, of course, R2-D2 is going to give him another 10%, and you're going to get another 20% from his own unique ability. And so he's going to have 100% crit chance, which means he's going to always be smashing the faces of your opponents. And he's going to get 100% turn meter after Deadeye. He really only does a couple of things. That's Deadeye, basic, and then basic, and then back to Deadeye, basic. Like, that's how he rolls. He just goes and he takes a ton of damage for the opponent. Deadeye is going to be able to stun them for a turn. I know that it won't land 100% of the time if you mod the way I'm suggesting, but I would suggest that you worry more about being able to flay a tank open in one turn than possibly stun that tank and be caught up in the webs of a taunt. So Deadeye can do over 30k. Mine does easily to a tank 33,000 to a tank that's even compressing the armor. It's pretty insane. I've even seen my Deadeye who hit low armored characters go over 47k. 47k to a light armored character. I hit CLS for 39,000 last night with my Deadeye. So again, if you build him for the damage dealing capacity, you're going to be able to see some real amazing results. Obviously, with his quick draw, he's got that turn meter reduction if they're over the turn meter, and if they're less, he's just going to do 75% more damage. So he may or may not even need that turn meter reduction. It depends on where the opponent's at. If not, he's going to do a lot more damage. But I have a lot of success with the turn meter reduction, and again, he's like 21% potency on mine. So this is excellent, and this attack also can't be evaded. This is a double tap. It's a lot of damage. The first hit normally does over 20k for me, and the next one does over 10k. So I can very easily do his special and then his basic and do over 60,000 to pretty much any character in the game. That is a ton of damage that basically every time he takes a turn, he does. So I would make him fast. I'd get him over 200 speed, use a crit damage and crit chance set. That's really what I would do, okay? So that's what I would do there. The other thing I mentioned is you have no tank, and really you don't have many tanks in general. When we come to tanks and I look, it really falls off pretty fast. You've got Stormtrooper Han in there. Poe Dameron is actually a really good tank, so same with Finn. Fives is not taunting, so that's tough. Of all of the top 5, or top 6 even, that you have, the number one best tank that you have, and the one that would make the most sense in a rebel team, is going to actually be Old Ben, Obi-Wan Kenobi. And the reason for that is he's going to give a bunch of turn meter to all of the other rebels when there are effects that are resisted. He'll give 3% for every effect resisted. He's the highest armor, so he's got the highest armor rate of any of the tanks up on the top 6 rows. He's phenomenal at compressing all the armor that your opponents are doing. He has a phenomenal Zeta that I've actually invested in personally, and I run Old Ben in my own arena team right now as we're speaking. So this isn't from me just suggesting. This is actually my real life usability. I'm using Old Ben. I have a Zeta on his taunt, which means that after he loses his first taunt, he gets it again, which is really nice when you're going against Thrawn, because Thrawn will fracture him to kill him, and then he'll be fractured, but his second taunt will trigger, which still forces them to hit him. And with his armor at 50%, it really makes everybody frustrated, because what damage they're doing to my Old Ben is just very little, if any of the damage. I got him, you know, I had Han Solo hitting for 6,000, which I'm sure is frustrating to my opponents who are trying to hit me and kill me when they're only doing 6,000 with their Han Solo that should be doing 10 to 20k easily on the basics. So again, really excellent tank. I would definitely finish him off. And then in general, when looking at yours, I would definitely suggest in general that you just, you know, continue working on a few other characters such as Rex. For the most part, you've got him, you know, I think gear 8, gear 9. I would finish him off. I'd get him to gear 11. I'd max out his abilities. I'd put on some good mods. Potency and health are probably the two that I would suggest, the two types of mod sets I would suggest. You don't even have to make him very fast, but he's one of those characters you can insert if you are going against a team that is just really fast and you're not able to beat it, and it seems like there's 3 or 4 teams in your climb that you keep hitting that you can't get past, and they're the only options to choose from. You slap in Rex, and all of a sudden you're able to beat them because your team is sped up significantly by the other team. So Rex should be an option for you to toss in from time to time to make modifications so you can climb at times and go against certain characters. Other characters I see, such as Grand Admiral Thrawn, you have gear 8, 7 stars. This is, again, one of those characters I would highly recommend for Arena. I currently use Grand Admiral Thrawn at gear 12 in Arena, just like Old Ben. Phenomenal with the fracture, with the countering capability, and the ability to regenerate protection on himself and another with the cleanse. So a cleanser and protection regeneration, it's phenomenal. I would say Thrawn is single-handedly the single best Darkside character currently in the game. Obviously, there are some really amazing Darkside characters, but in my opinion, Thrawn is number 1, especially when you're using him as a utility character in an arena team. So definitely would suggest you finish off Grand Admiral Thrawn. I also see down here Darth Nihilus at like gear 3 or 4 at 5 stars. Darth Nihilus is one of the top 5 best Darkside characters in the game for sure. Still to this day, I would highly recommend that you continue developing Darth Nihilus even at 5 stars. He's phenomenal. He has a massive protection pool, one of the largest in the game, and so it makes it very difficult to kill him, especially when you have a tank like Old Ben or someone that they're having to get caught up in, and or having Thrawn, Darth Nihilus is part of the meta and has been part of the meta since he came out. So he's one of those like Thrawn you just should absolutely have. And then lastly, out of Rebels, of course, I know this is a broken record for a lot of people, but Chirrut and Baze, even at 4 and 5 stars, I would highly recommend that you continue to develop them, put them in your favorites and level them up. Even if you can't get them to gear or star level 7 right away, still gear them up. They're phenomenal. They're a great duo. They're the singular best duo in the game, and you're never going to regret getting Chirrut and Baze up. You, if anything, hate going against them when you find a gear 10 and gear 11 team with Chirrut and Baze. Super annoying. Make sure that you have them as tools in your toolbox for lots of different areas of the game. So I would continue to develop. So like a lot of people, I just generally am suggesting Rex, Chase, Thrawn, Darth Nihilus. These are all characters that are meta viable. They've been for the last year or since inception of the game. And so I would highly recommend you continuing to develop them. And then remod Han Solo and get a tank in your arena team. Now, you asked me about the next generalized team you should focus on, a heroic AAT team, and your next Zeta, and your question is answered, all 3 in triplicate with resistance. Now, you wanted to know, should you Zeta Finn? You were thinking about it, you were leaning towards it, and I'm going to say absolutely this should be your next Zeta. What it's going to do is take this team from no viability to phenomenal viability. It will be one of the best heroic AAT teams you can have. Now I'm going to touch on the heroic AAT in a second, but I'm going to come back to just this being the next generalized team you focus on. Definitely Finn, and then I would continue to develop Resistance Trooper, Pilot, and BB-8 at a minimum to get them to gear 9, because the higher they are, the more damage they deal, the more damage they deal, the more damage you'll get in all of the phases of it. Now, their turn meter comes not from speed, but it comes from his leadership ability, and even at gear 8, they're going to be totally and completely viable. Okay, so they're going to be viable, and they're going to work just as well right now, except the amount of total damage you do in the heroic AAT is going to be less. You may get 8 million versus 12 million. So again, since this is kind of an in-game team, you're going to want to, after the Zeta, you're going to want to continue to develop them all up. Get them to gear 9 for now. You got 3 of them to gear 8. Just take them now to gear 9, and then from gear 9, focus on getting all your gear 9 to gear 10, because this is just an in-game team that you want to develop. So that's the next team I would suggest. But after Resistance, especially after you get them to, like, you know, gear 9 and gear 10, and you're kind of wondering which is the next team I would suggest is actually your Rogue One. You mentioned you thought about Rogue One. You already have a gear level 10 Gen Urso at 7 stars, so that's a phenomenal start on that team. You also have Cassian and K2SO at 7 stars. Cassian's at gear 8, K2SO's at gear 6. I would throw both of them once you're done with, or once you're at least high enough with your resistance that you feel comfortable using them. I would then start to focus on Rogue One. And the reason why I'm suggesting Rogue One, aside from the fact you asked about it and you were interested in it, is because they're actually required for territory battles, and the Rogue One team is a phenomenal team, one of the best teams for PvE, such as player versus environment. And then of course most of the characters are also usable in many other areas of the game. So definitely want to develop Cassian's gear and K2SO's gear. And then I've already suggested Chirrut and Baze to you for arena, just to have extra characters for your arena team as far as you being able to change up your team. And they're a part of Rogue One, so it's kind of 2 birds 1 stone, right? You develop them for Rogue One, you also develop them for arena. So I would definitely focus on them as your next team after Resistance. And your Resistance, again, is good enough now, but once you do the Zeta, but I would just continue to develop them so you can get more and more damage. The higher they are, like I said, the higher they are, the faster they are, the more damage they're going to deal. So that's definitely important. Now let's go ahead and move into the Fleet Arena. And you're doing about as good in Fleet Arena, if not better, than the main arena. And that's really good, and we can climb up there. The characters that you're using, I mean, eventually, when you develop Thrawn and you're able to develop your Chimera, you're going to be able to switch your Chimera in for the Executrix. But until then, until your Chimera and Thrawn are both developed, both the pilot and the ship, I would do the Executrix for sure. I would definitely use Biggs like you're using, and the Umbaran like you're using, and the TIE Fighter Pilot, the Imperial TIE Fighter, and the TIE Advance. So the team you're actually using is the exact team that I would suggest. In the backup, I would have Scimitar, Slave 1, and then either Wedge or Poe, and I'm leaning towards Poe because you're going to be developing your Poe in your resistance team, and Poe's ship, especially as a backup, is phenomenal. It's an excellent, very high damage dealing, very fast ship. So excellent. I would give it the edge over Wedge. Give it the edge over Wedge. Definitely I'd have Poe in that backup lineup. And so that's what I would do. I think your Fleet Arena, you're doing really well, but like I said, when I look at your inventory, one thing I noticed is that you do have a 5-star Chimera, but it's underdeveloped. It's only level 53. It doesn't really have his abilities up very high. And of course, Thrawn is holding him back. Thrawn's only at gear 8. I would make Thrawn one of your top 5 highest farming priorities in the game, because Chimera is undoubtedly the best capital ship in the game, even at 5 stars. Get it up to level 85, get its abilities maxed out, get Thrawn to level 10 or 11, get his abilities maxed out, get him some good mods, and put the Chimera in with the same team, and you're going to be blown away by the amount of offense capability it has, even over the Executrix. Now, for the last thing, we're going to talk about heroic AAT teams, and the first one we mentioned was Resistance. Now, I'm going to give you 2 teams, and these 2 teams are going to net you, once you have these teams developed, they're going to net you between 20 million to 40 million for yourself. Just 2 teams. You'll get 20 million to 40 million. You will have the Resistance team, and then you're going to have a hybrid team. I'm going to tell you about that hybrid team here in a minute. But for Resistance, and you got to hear me out, because the hybrid team is going to use some of your Resistance. So you're going to have to make do with your other Resistance for your Resistance team. The first 3 for Resistance you need is going to be Finn, Poe, and Trooper. That's really the 3 that you have to have. I would then add Pilot into that, because you need the pilot, and then I would put in Rey. Now, Rey doesn't really have much synergy. She does do a lot of damage, and she's the only character that's not going to be applying the expose. But I would use her in this Resistance team, because your R2-D2 and BB-8 are going to be pulled out for another team. So when looking at your Resistance, because we're going to pull R2-D2 and BB-8 out for that second team, the only ones that are left are the last 5. And again, Finn, Poe, Rey, Resistance Pilot, and Trooper. 4 out of 5 of them are going to do that ability with expose, and Rey's just there to deal damage. Those 5 are going to be able to net you, when you first start using them, probably 5 to 6 million, but you'll be able to push that up into the 8 million. And then when you get these characters maxed out with really fast mods and everything, you'll be able to get into the 12 millions to 14 million. So really, really good. I would use them in phase 2. You can just start it off right at the very beginning of phase 2, and you'll be able to go through a ton of phase 2 with this team. And then at the end of phase 2, if you can launch it in then, or at the beginning of phase 3, I would use the hybrid team. The hybrid team I'm going to suggest is going to have Commander Luke and R2-D2. I would have Commander Luke as the leader, and of course you've got him really leveled up well, and R2-D2, which you have at gear 2, and leveled up really well. So these 2 characters are already viable. And then the next one would be Thrawn in this, and you want to max his abilities out and get him past gear level 8. You have him at gear level 8 right now, and so you're definitely going to want to take him up out of gear 8 and get him up for this team, specifically for Arena and for Fleet Arena. So you can see how important Thrawn is becoming for you. I would really make him your #1 priority, but he will be number 3 in this hybrid team. Also on this team, you're going to have Han Solo, and you've got him looking great. Again, I would remod him the way I suggested to mod him for this particular team. And lastly, I would suggest BB-8. BB-8 is excellent, and where you have him is good, but I would just finish off his mods, finish his abilities up, and then he's at gear 8. I would continue to develop him both for your Resistance team, but also for this hybrid team. So you've got CLS, Han Solo, Thrawn, R2-D2, and BB-8. That hybrid team, when used at the end of phase 2 / into phase 3, can do anywhere from 8 million to 28 million with those characters, depending upon how leveled up you have. So if you're able to get 5 million out of your Resistance and 8 million out of this hybrid team, you're going to get 13 million to start after that Zeta and after these characters are put together. And then you're going to only get better from there, up to around 40 million with just these two teams. Because you own all the characters you need to make these two teams possible, that's why I'm suggesting it. Not everybody has CLS and Han Solo at 7 stars or BB-8 at 7 stars, but you do. So because you have these characters at 7 stars, it's critical that you develop these characters and that you use them. It just makes Heroic AAT far easier when you have far less teams to worry about. This is really the most hyper efficient way of doing the Heroic AAT, and also you can use these characters in the Rancor raid. So Chosen Undead, you're doing really well. Again, I would suggest remodding Han Solo, putting in a tank like Old Ben, but you're obviously going to have to develop him. In general, just getting your Rex and your Chirrut Bays and your Thrawn and Darth Nihilus, all of them developed. Specifically, Thrawn is your most important in my opinion. Obviously, Zeta, your Finn, and then start to develop your Gear 8 resistance, and then after you're, get the resistance to a point where you're happy, start focusing on those Rogue One characters, with Chirrut Bays, but also Cassian and K2SO as well. Everything looks great. Another shout out to Womp Rat Cartel. What's happening, you guys? Chosen Undead. If anybody has any questions or any comments for him, leave them in the comments down below. As always, keep your gaming on. Warrior out.